Welcome. Tonight we will take a gentle journey into the long and quiet history of glass and windows. For thousands of years, human beings lived in homes without the comfort of transparent openings. Darkness pressed in on every side. Rooms were lit only by small fires, dim candles, and narrow slits in walls. The simple act of letting light into a space was once a luxury known only to the few. In this calm exploration, we will move slowly through time, tracing how people once lived without glass, how they discovered it, how it became a part of daily life, and how it shaped the grand palaces and quiet cottages of the world. This story is not one of great battles or loud triumphs, but of quiet persistence, daily survival, and the slow unfolding of human ingenuity. So, settle in. Allow your mind to wander gently as the light of history flickers softly before you. Imagine yourself in a small dwelling, not today, but many centuries ago. The air is heavy with the scent of smoke, because the only light inside comes from a small fire, smouldering in the hearth. Its smoke escapes through a hole in the roof, though much of it lingers, clinging to your clothes, your skin, your hair. There are no windows of glass here. Instead, the walls are solid, sometimes pierced with a small opening just large enough to let in a draught or a thin beam of daylight. At night, these holes are covered with wood, or with stretched animal hide, or with a scrap of oiled cloth that lets a little glow pass through, but no clear view of the world outside. The rhythm of life is tied to the sun. We wake as the faint light filters through the cracks in the shutters. You squint because the room is dim, and your eyes take time to adjust. Inside, the corners remain in shadow, mysterious and quiet, even at midday. You notice how precious light is when you want to weave, or repair a tool, or read a small scrap of writing. You must move closer to the door, or sit near the fire. In winter, the days feel especially short, and the darkness lingers long. The people of this time know darkness intimately. Children grow up accustomed to playing in half-shadow. Adults work by touch, guided by memory rather than by clear sight. Meals are eaten near the hearth, with faces lit from below, while the rest of the room falls into obscurity. The walls are thick, meant to keep out the cold winds, but they also keep out the light. To step inside is to leave the brightness of day behind, and enter a space where night seems always nearby. Imagine, for a moment, standing near the door. You open the shutter. For just a while, daylight streams in, painting the dusty air in pale gold. But soon the wood must be closed again to keep the warmth in and the wind out. And so most of the day passes in dimness, with sight limited and light always fleeting. This was life for countless generations. A life where the boundary between day and night was not marked by clocks, but by the walls themselves, and by the absence of clear glass. The people adapted. They rose early, they rested often, and they accepted that darkness was part of every room, every task, every rhythm of the day. And yet, quietly, somewhere in the world, change was stirring. In certain corners of the ancient world, fire met sand, and something new was born. But for now, in this first scene, we remain here, in the quiet, shadowed rooms of the past, where glass is unknown, and windows are only small holes against the outside. Life is slow, the air is heavy, and the light, when it comes, is a fleeting gift. And now we turn to the beginnings of glass itself. The story is old, so old that it slips between history and legend. One tale, passed down from the ancient world, imagines a group of traders resting on a sandy shore to cook their meal. They placed heavy blocks of natron, a mineral they carried for trade, into the fire to hold their cooking pots above the flames. As the fire burned hotter and longer, the sand beneath mingled with the natron, and in the morning, when the embers cooled, they saw something strange, a hard, glistening substance, not stone, not metal, but something new, something translucent, something that caught the light in a way they had never seen before. Whether the story is true or not hardly matters. What matters is that somewhere, thousands of years ago, people first saw the miracle of melted sand. Imagine yourself in Mesopotamia, over 3,000 years before our time. The land is dry, the air warm, and the furnaces glow with fire. Inside simple workshops, men and women tend to clay crucibles filled with a mix of sand, ash, and lime. They watch carefully as the mixture softens, bubbling and glowing, transforming before their eyes. The work is hot, the air thick with smoke and heat, but also filled with anticipation. What emerges from those crucibles is crude, colored, and often filled with bubbles, but it is glass. Small beads are shaped, sometimes fused into ornaments, sometimes used to decorate pottery. They shimmer with a dull glow, but to those who had never seen glass before, they were wondrous. Centuries pass. In Egypt, glassmakers refine their methods. They shape vessels using clay cores, coating them with molten glass and rolling them slowly to smooth the sides. The colors deepen blue, green, amber each shade, holding its own quiet mystery. And then, in Rome, the story changes again. Here, around the 1st century before our era, artisans discover the technique of glass blowing. Imagine a craftsman lifting a hollow iron pipe to his lips, dipping it carefully into molten glass, then blowing gently, steadily, as a glowing bubble expands at the end of the tube. The glass stretches thin, translucent, alive with firelight. With careful turning and shaping, It becomes a vessel, smooth and delicate, unlike anything made before. The discovery is quiet, almost unremarkable at first, but glass blowing makes the material faster, easier, and more versatile to produce. And with this change, glass begins to move beyond the realm of the rare, into the world of the possible. Centuries later, in the winding alleys of Venice, another chapter unfolds. On the island of Murano, glassmakers guard their secrets fiercely. Here they learn how to make glass clearer, purer, free from the smoky tints of earlier ages. Their furnaces glow day and night, casting a warm shimmer across the canals. You can imagine walking past one of these workshops, hearing the gentle hum of the bellows, the hiss of molten glass, the slow breath of artisans shaping their glowing material. To the outside world, their work seems magical. How could sand become crystal? How could fire capture light itself? Even for those who knew the recipe, the process felt like a kind of alchemy. And so, glass was born through chance, through fire, through human persistence. From Mesopotamian beads to Roman vessels to Venetian clarity, the material slowly revealed its potential. Yet, even then, glass was rare. Few could afford it. Many would live their entire lives, never touching it, never seeing it used in their own homes. But its presence was growing. Quietly, steadily, glass was finding its place in the human story. As glass spread slowly across the ancient world, it began to find a new purpose. Not only for beads or vessels, not only for small ornaments of luxury, but for openings in walls, for windows. At first, these windows were simple. In Rome, wealthier households set small panes of cloudy glass into stone frames. The glass was thick, uneven, and tinted, allowing only a hazy glow to enter. You could not see clearly through it. The outside world appeared blurred, softened, transformed into gentle shapes and colors. But for the first time, light itself could enter a room without wind, without rain, without cold. This was not just a convenience. It was a wonder. Imagine yourself standing in such a room. The air is still. No draught curls around your feet. Yet the daylight pours in. It feels almost like a gift, something magical, as though the wall itself had opened, yet remained whole. Over centuries, glass windows took on meanings far beyond the practical. In great cathedrals of medieval Europe, artisans shaped colored glass into vast patterns. Scenes from sacred texts glowed in reds, blues, and golds, each piece carefully cut and set into lead frames. When sunlight poured through them, the stone interior of the church was transformed into a place of shimmering light. Figures danced on the floor. Halos glowed across the walls, and the very air seemed alive with color. For those who entered these spaces, the experience was overwhelming. Many could not read the texts of Scripture, but they could read the windows. Each scene told a story. Each panel revealed a lesson, all illuminated by the shifting sun. And the light itself was thought to be wholly passing through the glass. It became something more than light, something divine. Elsewhere, in different cultures, windows carried other meanings. In ancient China, latticed windows with translucent paper coverings softened the world outside, filtering it into delicate patterns. Light entered not as brightness, but as atmosphere, a quiet diffusion that turned the room into a place of calm reflection. In the Islamic world, stained glass and carved stone screens created intricate mosaics of shadow and light, filling homes and mosques with patterns that seemed infinite, each one a reminder of cosmic order and beauty. Windows became thresholds, not only between inside and outside, but between the ordinary and the sacred. They allowed people to sense the world without being exposed to it. They framed views like paintings. They invited imagination, contemplation, and prayer. Even in the simplest homes, a small piece of glass, if one could afford, it was more than a practical object. It was a mark of connection, a bridge between darkness and day. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in a chapel centuries ago. The morning sun rises higher. At first, the glass above you glows faintly. Then, slowly, beams of colored light descend, painting the floor in crimson, azure, and emerald. The figures in the glass seem to awaken. The saints look down, the angels hover, and the stone itself feels warmer. You sit silent, watching the slow dance of light. Time slips away. The rhythm of the sun and the glow of the glass create their own quiet music, a reminder that even the simplest material, sand melted into crystal, can become something transcendent. Glass and windows, once rare curiosities, had become mysteries, symbols, and instruments of wonder. And yet, beyond the cathedrals and palaces, most people still lived in dim rooms, with shutters, hides, and smoke. For them, glass remained far away, a luxury glimpsed perhaps in a church or in the home of a lord. But change was coming. Soon, glass would no longer belong only to the sacred and the wealthy. Soon, it would find its way into ordinary homes, into workshops, into schools, and with it would come both comfort and complication. And now we turn to the homes of the privileged. For centuries, glass remained scarce, expensive, and reserved for those who could afford such fragile beauty. In castles, manors, and palaces, windows became more than openings. They became symbols. Imagine walking into the great hall of a medieval castle. The walls are thick, built of stone, meant for defense and endurance. Yet here and there, set into the stone, are panes of glass. They do not shine as clearly as the windows we know today. They are uneven, wavy, touched by air bubbles from the furnace. Yet when the sun strikes them, they glisten faintly, scattering light into the hall. To the visiting guest, these windows whisper of wealth, of access to artisans, of power itself. The contrast with ordinary homes is striking. While peasants still sealed their walls with wood or parchment, the noble dined and conversed beneath delicate sheets of glass, while a farmer's cottage remained shadowed even at midday. The palace glowed faintly with light that filtered gently through its costly windows. By the Renaissance, as techniques improved and trade spread, glass became more refined. Palaces in Italy, France, and England began to boast vast windows, entire walls of glass, carefully set into ornate frames, overlooked gardens and courtyards. Bat, Versailles, endless rows of windows reflected the sky, doubling the sun's presence, making light itself seem a possession of the king. But as glass reached further into society, its consequences became more complex. On the one hand, windows transformed daily life. Rooms became brighter. People could work longer hours indoors. Schools and workshops grew more efficient, less bound to the daylight outside. In cities, shop windows appeared, displaying goods behind shining panes, drawing in curious passers-by. Glass was no longer just protection from wind, and rainit was a tool for commerce, learning, and comfort. And yet there were subtle costs. With light came exposure. Windows opened homes to the gaze of others, raising questions of privacy. With transparency came fragility. A stone thrown, a storm unleashed, and a costly pane could shatter, reminding owners of its delicacy. And with production came pollution. Glass furnaces burned ceaselessly, consuming fuel, belching smoke, leaving their mark on the air and earth. Even more profound was the way glass reshaped how humans thought of themselves. It allowed mirrors to be perfected suddenly. People could see their own reflections with startling clarity. Vanity grew, but so too did self-awareness, identity, and art. Glass allowed telescopes and microscopes to emerge suddenly. The vastness of the cosmos and the hidden intricacies of life came into focus. Windows, in a sense, had opened not only rooms, but the universe itself. And so the story of glass is one of contrasts. It began in shadowy huts where people longed for light. It passed through smoky furnaces where artisans coaxed clarity from fire. It glowed in cathedrals where light became sacred. It shimmered in palaces where windows became emblems of power. And finally, it found its way into the homes of ordinary families. Until today, glass is everywhere so constant, so ordinary that we seldom notice its quiet presence. Take a moment now and imagine yourself sitting in your own room. A window stands nearby, Perhaps sunlight filters softly through it during the day. Perhaps tonight it reflects the cool, silvery glow of the moon. That simple pane of glass, clear and calm, is the result of thousands of years of human effort, discovery, and patience. A reminder that even the most ordinary objects carry with them the deep history of countless lives. And as the story draws to a close, allow yourself to rest with that thought, that behind every window pane lies the memory of ancient furnaces, glowing sands, and the hands of artisans long gone. That the quiet light in your room tonight is part of a story as old as civilization itself. Settle deeper into your rest now. Let the rhythm of history fade into the rhythm of your breathing. The story of glass is complete, and you may drift gently into sleep. Now, from the topic of melting sand into glass with fire, turn to the long and gentle story of light and fire itself, the quiet glow that has guided humanity from its earliest days. Before lamps, before candles, before even the idea of controlled flame, there was only darkness and fire. Nightfall meant uncertainty, a world of shadows where work ceased and only sleep or fear remained. Light was life, and the lack of it shaped how people lived, how they dreamed, and how they understood the world. In this slow unfolding, we will walk through 4 stages. First, we will imagine life in darkness before lamps. Then we will follow the story of those who first tamed flame, shaping it into lamps and candles. We will wander into the rituals and mysteries that light carried with it, from temples to festivals. And finally, we will step into the halls of the elite, where lamps became luxury, where light was power, and where consequences followed. Let the thought of a gentle flame guide you now. Settle in, breathe slowly, and we begin. Imagine yourself in a world before artificial light. The sun has set. The horizon glows faintly, then fades. Shadows deepen. The fields and paths that were familiar by day vanish into darkness. Your home is small, perhaps of wood or clay, its walls close, its air heavy with smoke from the day's cooking fire. There is no lamp, no candle, only the fading embers of a hearth. The fire burns low, giving off a dim glow, enough to see the outlines of those sitting nearby, but not enough to chase away the dark corners of the room. Beyond the door, the night is complete, filled with the sounds of insects, of distant animals, of wind moving through trees. Life slows with the dark. Work must end. Tools are set aside. Families gather close, speaking softly or falling silent. The world feels smaller, contained within the glow of the hearth. To step outside is to enter a vast unknown, where the stars shimmer faintly, but the ground beneath your feet disappears. Night shapes your life. Journeys are rare after sunset. Stories, prayers, and songs fill the hours until sleep. Time itself feels shorter, compressed between dusk and dawn. And always there is the awareness that the fire could fade completely, leaving nothing but darkness. This was the rhythm of life before lamps. A world ruled by the cycle of the sun, where darkness was not only an absence, but a presence, shaping human habit and imagination. Yet in that darkness, curiosity stirred. What if light could be carried, shaped, sustained? What if flame could belong to the night as well as the day? And so, slowly, people began to experiment placing burning reeds in clay, soaking rushes in animal fat, filling carved stones with oil. The first lamps were born, small, fragile, yet profound. The first lamps were not grand inventions, but humble tools, shaped from what people had at hand. Imagine a small, hollow stone, or a seashell, holding a pool of animal fat. A strip of plant fiber rests within it, drawing up the fuel. The end of the strip is lit, and a soft, flickering flame rises. It is small, no larger than the flame of a match, but in the darkness it feels miraculous. In Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago, such lamps began to appear. Archaeologists have uncovered tiny clay vessels, their spouts darkened by soot. They were simple bowls at first, later molded into more refined shapes, easy to carry from one place to another. Their fuel was oil, sometimes olive, sometimes sesame, sometimes rendered fat from animals. Imagine yourself in a mud-brick home in that ancient world. The lamp rests on a low table. Its flame trembles gently, casting long shadows across the wall. The air smells faintly of smoke and oil. Around it, family members sit close, speaking softly, weaving baskets or mending cloth. For the first time, the night has become longer, its hours stretched by the patient glow of fire made tame. In Egypt, lamps took on new forms of alabaster, their pale stone glowing faintly with the fire within. The flame was not only useful, but beautiful, a symbol of life and divinity. Light itself was sacred, associated with the sun god Ra. To carry a lamp was not only to chase away darkness, but to hold a fragment of the sun in your hand. In Greece and Rome, the art of lamp-making flourished. Potters shaped small clay lamps with delicate spouts, decorated with images of animals, gods, and everyday scenes. Wealthier households used bronze lamps, polished to shine in the firelight. Oil, especially olive oil, fueled these flames. Whole streets might be lit for festivals, thousands of lamps burning together, turning night briefly into day. Behind each lamp was the quiet labor of countless hands. Farmers pressed olives for their oil. Potters shaped the vessels, firing them in kilns. Merchants carried them along trade routes, so that light spread from one culture to another. Put, and in the great households and temples, attendants tended the flames, keeping them alive. In some traditions, sacred lamps were never allowed to go out, their steady glow a sign of continuity, of divine presence. To guard the flame was an honor, a duty, a devotion. The lamp was not only an invention, it was a companion, which changed how people lived, how they worked, how they prayed. It lengthened the day, softened the night, and gave light a form that could be held, cherished, and shared. And yet the lamp was never only practicable. In nearly every culture, it carried meanings beyond the flame itself, a symbol of life, of hope, of spirit, of the thin but enduring thread that holds back the dark. From the very beginning, light was more than a tool. It was a mystery, a symbol, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. The lamp, small and fragile though it seemed, carried meanings far deeper than its flame. Imagine a temple in ancient Mesopotamia. Within its walls, oil lamps burned steadily, their flames flickering against carved stone figures. The air smells of smoke and pressed oil. Piyush to the worshippers. The lamp is not only a source of brightness, it is an offering, a way of honoring the gods, a way of bringing the warmth of the sun into the sanctuary of the night. In Egypt, lamps glowed in tombs and shrines. Light was life, and to place a lamp with the dead was to ensure that their path into the afterlife would not be lost to darkness. The steady flame symbolized the eternal cycle of rebirth, the daily rising of the sun across the horizon. In Greece, lamps played their role in sacred rituals. During festivals, thousands of them would be lit, their flames reflected in polished bronze, dancing across the faces of statues. A single lamp, carried carefully, might light the way for processions. The flame was fragile, yet its meaning was immense, a living link between worshipper and God. In Rome, lamps glowed in the household shrines of the Lares and Penates, the spirits of home and ancestors. Each family kept its small flame alive, a quiet reminder that the home itself was sacred, protected by light. Elsewhere in the world, the symbolism of lamps grew just as profound. In India, lamps of clay, called diyas, were lit during Diwali, the festival of lights. Imagine hundreds, thousands of small flames glowing in the night, lining doorways, courtyards, and streets. The darkness recedes, replaced by a sea of golden light. For those who gather, it is a celebration of life's triumph over shadow, of knowledge over ignorance, of hope over despair. In East Asia, lanterns became a central part of ritual and festivity. At the Chinese Lantern Festival, great glowing shaped dragons, lotuses, animals lit the night sky, turning darkness into a canvas of gentle fire. Lanterns drifted into the air or across the water, carrying wishes, prayers and hopes with them. Even in Christian traditions, the lamp held sacred meaning. In churches, candles were lit before icons and altars. Their flames symbolized prayer itself, rising into the unseen. In monasteries, lamps burned day and night, never extinguished, representing the eternal presence of spirit. Light was never simply light. It was life, protection, hope, memory, a fragile flame against the vastness of night, a symbol that connected the seen and the unseen, the human and the divine. And across cultures, across time, this small invention, the lamp, became one of humanity's most powerful metaphors. The light in the darkness, the flame of spirit, the reminder that even the smallest glow can hold back the greatest shadow. Poor, the wealthy and powerful light was more than necessity. It became a mark of privilege, a symbol of their place above others. Imagine a grand Roman villa at night. In an ordinary home, perhaps one or two small clay lamps glow faintly, their flames struggling against the dark. But here, dozens of bronze lamps hang from chains, their polished surfaces scattering light across marble floors. Slaves move quietly among them, refilling oil, trimming wicks, ensuring the glow never falters. To sit in such brightness was not only comforted with status. In medieval and early modern Europe, candles became the luxury of the elite. Ordinary families used tallow candles made from animal fat, their smoke thick, their smell heavy. But in noble houses, beeswax candles burned clean and golden, filling the hall with light that smelled faintly sweet. Imagine a long table in a castle lined with rows of beeswax candles, their flames reflected in silver cups and polished armor. The glow seemed endless, yet each candle was costly, each flame a display of wealth. In palaces and courts, light became spectacle. Chandeliers of iron or crystal held dozens of candles, turning night into day. Banquets glittered in their glow. The wealthy dined late into the evening, their guests marveling at the sheer abundance of flame. Where the poor ended their work at sunset, the rich extended their hours, reshaping the night to their will. But with this luxury came consequence. The demand for oil, for wax, for fuel grew vast. Olive groves expanded, bees were cultivated in great numbers, and whole industries arose to feed the hunger for light. For those who could not afford such luxuries, darkness remained constant. The divide between rich and poor was drawn not only in wealth, but in brightness itself. Later, as cities grew, light became tied to power and control. Torches lit the streets at night, first by watchmen, later by organized patrols. To walk in a lit street was to feel safety, order, and authority. In Paris and London, street lighting became a mark of progress, but also a tool of surveillance, of discipline. For the elite, light was indulgence. For the common people, it was rationed carefully, a wick trimmed short, a flame shielded from waste. For all, it reshaped the rhythm of life. And so, the story of lamps is both gentle and profound. They gave warmth, comfort, and safety. They carried beauty, ritual, and meaning. But they also created division, industry, and dependence. From the first shell filled with oil to the golden blaze of palaces, lamps changed not only the night, but humanity itself. And as you rest tonight, perhaps with a small light glowing softly nearby, you are part of that long story. A story of flame carried through thousands of years, through countless hands, through endless nights. Let the glow soften around you. Let the darkness feel safe, no longer threatening. For the story of lamps and light is complete. And now you may close your eyes and drift quietly into your own night, moving on from glass and fire. Let us drift through the long and quiet story of timekeeping. Before clocks, before watches, before even the idea of precise hours, people lived by the rhythm of the sun and the turning of the seasons. The day unfolded slowly, marked only by shadows, by hunger, by the calls of bells or roosters. In this gentle exploration, we will imagine life before time was measured. We will meet the quiet innovators who first learned to track hours. We will wander through temples where water dripped steadily to mark the night. And we will sit in the grand halls of nobility where ornate clocks became both tools and treasures. Time itself is endless. And so our journey will move slowly, without haste, as all true stories of sleep should. Settle in, breathe softly, and let us begin. Imagine yourself in a small village, centuries before the first clock ticked. You wake not to an alarm, but to the gradual brightening of the sky. The rooster calls, though it may not be the same moment each day. You rise because the light tells you to, not the minute hand of a dial. There are no precise hours here. Work begins when the sun clears the hills. Meals are eaten when the stomach stirs. Prayers are spoken when bells from the church or temple call across the fields. The rhythm of the day is organic, flowing like water, unmeasured but steady. Shadows are the closest thing to a clock. You glance at the length of your own shadow on the ground. Long shadows mean early morning. Short shadows mean midday. When shadows stretch again, you know the evening is near. At night, the rhythm changes. Candles burn briefly, and then the darkness is complete. Families huddle close, sharing stories or resting in long intervals. In many places, sleep is divided into two parts, sleep and second sleep, separated by an hour of wakefulness in the quiet dark. No bells wake you, no machines count your minutes, only the stars, moving slowly across the sky, tell you that time is passing. This was life before clocks. Days shaped by nature, nights measured only by firelight and silence. People lived within time, but not under it, and yet, somewhere, curiosity stirred. What if time could be counted? What if hours could be captured, measured, held in human hands? Soon, in distant lands, experiments began. As centuries passed, people grew restless with the vague rhythms of sun and shadow. Farmers, monks, sailors, and rulers each had their reasons. A farmer longed to know the best hour to sow seed. Monks, devoted to prayer, sought a way to rise at precise intervals, even in the middle of the night. Sailors needed a way to navigate the seas, where shadows could not always guide them. And so, slowly, gently, time began to be measured. One of the earliest tools was the sundial. Imagine a smooth stone, a wooden stick rising from its center, casting a shadow. As the sun crossed the sky, the shadow shifted, sweeping slowly across carved lines that marked morning, midday, and evening. It was simple, yet profound. For the first time, people could divide the day, not just into morning and night, but into segments. But sundials had a weakness. They fell silent at night, and so came the water clock. Imagine yourself in ancient Egypt, or perhaps in Babylon. A stone vessel filled with water sits in the temple. At its base is a small hole, carefully drilled. Drop by drop, the water escapes, falling into another container. Marks etched into the vessel reveal how much time has passed as the water lowers. The rhythm is steady, soothing time measured not by the sun, but by the flow of water itself. Later, in Greece, these water clocks called clepsydras became common. In courts of law, they were used to time speeches. A man's words could last only as long as the water flowed. Time, once endless, had suddenly become a resource, something that could run out, just as water runs from a vessel. Centuries rolled onward. In the great monasteries of medieval Europe, another need arose. Monks prayed 8 times a day, at intervals fixed not by the sun, but by devotion. Candle clocks and sand hourglasses marked these prayers. Imagine the flame of a tall candle, notched with lines, burning slowly down as each hour slipped away. Imagine the hourglass, turned gently, the fine grains of sand sliding in silence from one chamber to another. But the true transformation came with the mechanical clock in the 13th century, somewhere in Europe, perhaps in England. Perhaps in Italy craftsmen began to build great wooden machines, driven by weights and gears. These clocks did not need the sun, nor water, nor flame. They ticked with a steady rhythm, marking time with precision unknown before. Picture a monk in the tower of his monastery, adjusting the weights, listening to the slow grind of gears, watching the great hand turn across a dial. Soon bells rang across the town, not only to call for prayer, but to mark the hours of the day. For the first time, the lives of entire communities began to shift, no longer tied only to the rhythm of nature. People began to live by the rhythm of the clock, and behind these machines were the quiet figures of clockmakers. They worked patiently, filing gears, carving wooden teeth, and later shaping iron and brass. Their workshops smelled of oil and metal, their benches scattered with tiny tools. Each clock was a marvel, a treasure of patience and precision. Few names are remembered, but their craft reshaped the very way people lived. Time, once vague, had become exact, and with each tick, with each ring of the bell, society stepped further into the measured world. As clocks spread across the world, they were not seen only as tools. They became symbols, mysteries, and even sources of wonder. Imagine standing in a medieval town square. Above you, in the tower of the church or the hall, a great mechanical clock strikes. The bell tolls slowly, its sound rolling across the rooftops. For those who hear it, the bell is more than a reminder of the hour. It is a reminder of order, of the rhythm of life, of the authority of the town itself. In many places, clocks were first and foremost religious instruments. In monasteries, bells rang to summon monks to prayer. Each ring of the bell divided the day into sacred intervals, a rhythm not of commerce or labor, but of devotion. For centuries, this was how time was known, not as numbers, but as prayers, each hour belonging to the divine. But the meaning of time soon grew larger. In Islamic lands, scholars refined water clocks and astrolabes to mark the hours of prayer. Imagine the quiet interior of a mosque as a muezzin prepares to call the faithful. A timepiece tells him when the sun has reached its mark, when the shadow has grown long enough, when the next prayer must be spoken. Time became a bridge between the heavens and human lives, measured carefully so that rituals might unfold in harmony with the sky. Elsewhere, timekeeping took on a sense of magic. In China, elaborate water clocks and astronomical instruments measured not only hours, but the cycles of the heavens. These devices were often kept in the hands of the emperor, their secrets guarded, their presence a sign that the ruler alone could control the rhythm of the cosmos. To own time was to own power. The symbolism of time reached into art and philosophy as well. In Europe, hourglasses appeared in paintings, cradled in the hands of saints, or held by the figure of death. They became reminders of life's brevity, of the sand slipping away with each breath. To look upon an hourglass was not only to see the passing of minutes sit, was to contemplate mortality itself. And yet, in other places, clocks were celebrated as wonders of ingenuity. Imagine the great astronomical clock of Prague, built in the 15th century. Crowds gathered to watch as the dials turned, showing not only the hour, but the movement of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Figures of saints and skeletons moved with each strike, a theatre of time unfolding in mechanical form. To the townspeople, it was almost alive, a symbol of the mystery of the cosmos captured in wood and metal. Clocks and timepieces became bridges between the sacred and the everyday. They marked when to pray, when to eat, when to labor, when to rest. But they also reminded people of their place in the universe, of the passage of life, of the slow turning of the heavens above, and always the steady tickle, the slow drip of water, or the flow of sand, spoke softly in the background, a reminder that time does not stop, that it does not wait, that it is always moving, whether noticed or not. For some, this was comforting, for others, unsettling, but for all, it was inescapable. As mechanical clocks spread across Europe and beyond, they remained for centuries a luxury of the powerful. A great lord, a bishop, or a wealthy merchant might commission a clock not only to tell the time, but to display their status. Imagine a grand hall in the 15th century. At the far end, mounted against the wall, stands an elaborate clock. Its case is gilded, its face decorated with symbols of the zodiac. Each hour, tiny figures emerge, kings, saints, angels moving stiffly across the stage of gears. Guests look on in wonder. The clock does more than measure time. It displays wealth, artistry, and command over a technology few can afford. For ordinary people, time still flowed more loosely. But for the elite, time became a possession, an object they could display, control, and even flaunt. In the 16th and 17th centuries, time grew smaller. Watches appeared first as heavy, egg-shaped devices worn on a chain, then as finer, flatter objects carried in a pocket. Imagine a nobleman lifting his ornate watch, its cover engraved with flowers and curling leaves. He opens it slowly, revealing delicate hands turning above a face of ivory. The ticking is faint but steady, a private heartbeat of time. Few could afford such objects. A watch was as much a jewel as it was a tool. For kings and queens, clocks became gifts of diplomacy, exchanged between courts as signs of respect and power. For scholars, precise clocks enabled new sciences: astronomy, navigation, physics, all dependent on measured intervals. For the wealthy, clocks and watches became personal treasures, reminders of their ability to master what once seemed uncontrollable. Yet, as time grew more precise, its consequences deepened. In towns and cities, bells rang not only for prayer, but to mark working hours. Laborers rose when the bell struck, toiled while it chimed, and rested when it fell silent. Time was no longer only sacred, it was economic. Factories of the 18th and 19th centuries would make this shift complete. Their clocks did not symbolize wealth, but discipline. Workers arrived at the hour, labored by the hour, were paid by the hour. The freedom of natural rhythms gave way to the strict beat of the mechanical clock, and yet there was beauty as well. Timepieces became more refined, their craftsmanship more delicate. In Geneva, London, and Paris, master watchmakers built mechanisms so small, so precise, that they seemed like miracles of human skill. Jewels served as bearings, gold as casing, enamel as decoration. To hold such a watch was to hold centuries of knowledge in the palm of your hand. The consequences of timekeeping were mixed. It gave order, but also constraint. It brought efficiency, but also pressure. It united communities with shared rhythms, but also divided hours into labor and rest in ways that felt less natural. And yet it also opened new worlds. Without precise clocks, there could be no reliable maps of the seas, no voyages across the globe, no discoveries of distant lands. Without watches, explorers and scientists could not chart the heavens or observe the smallest motions of nature. From the dripping of water in ancient temples to the tick of the watch in a noble S pocket, humanity's journey with time has always been one of both wonder and weight. And tonight, as you rest, you too are part of this story. The clock near your bedside, the watch on your wrist, the phone in your handle are descendants of these long histories, shaped by countless hands, centuries of patience, and a shared human desire to understand the passing of moments. As you breathe slowly, let each breath become its own measure of time, not rushed, not counted, but natural, as it was long ago. The story of clocks and watches is complete, and you may let it tick softly into sleep. And now, for the not-so-grand finale, we will divulge into the story of writing tools, the quiet instruments that allowed human thought to be carried across centuries. Before pens and pencils, before ink and paper, there was only memory. Stories spoken aloud, remembered by heart, passed from one person to another. Words lived only as long as they were heard, but with writing, thoughts could endure, reaching beyond the moment, surviving across time. And yet, writing itself required tools. From the first marks, scratched into stone, to clay tablets pressed with stylus tips, to quills dipped in ink, to the pens and pencils of today. Every tool carried its own rhythm, its own texture, its own influence on how people expressed themselves. Tonight we will explore this history gently, in 4 quiet movements. First, we will step into daily life before writing tools, when memory alone held knowledge. Then we will meet those who first shaped the tools of inscription, the makers of styluses, brushes, quills, and pens. We will wander into the rituals and mysteries that writing carried with it, the sacred script notes and carved records. And finally, we will look to the lives of the elite who wielded writing as power, luxury, and legacy. Breathe slowly. Imagine yourself holding a simple stylus or pen. Let us begin. Imagine a world without writing. The sun rises, and with it comes the work of the day. Farming, hunting, weaving, tending to children. Instructions are spoken aloud, lessons taught face to face, stories told beside the fire. If something is to be remembered, it must be carried in the mind. A merchant recalls which neighbor owes him grain. A shepherd remembers which animal belongs to which family. A healer carries in memory the herbs, roots, and rituals of care. A parent teaches a child songs that speak of ancestors, of the turning of seasons, of gods and spirits. At night, families gather around the hearth. A story is told, of heroes, of journeys, of origins. Each listener holds the story in memory. Bell, so that it may be told again tomorrow and the next day, and to children not yet born. Knowledge lives in the rhythm of voice, in the patient listening of the community. But memory is fragile. A story can change as it passes from mouth to mouth. A detail may be forgotten, a number misremembered, a message lost. Trade grows, kingdoms rise, and rituals deepen. And with them comes the need for permanence. Imagine yourself standing by a riverbank. In your hand, a stick. You press it into the damp clay at your feet, leaving a line. Another line crosses it. A mark has been made, not in the air, but in the earth itself. The beginning of a tool. The beginning of writing. Life before writing tools was rich, filled with voice, rhythm, and song. But it was also fleeting, fragile, carried only as far as memory could reach. And so, slowly, patiently, humanity began to create the instruments that would allow thought itself to endure. The first writing tools were simple, almost humble. In Mesopotamia, over 5,000 years ago, scribes pressed symbols into wet clay tablets. Their tool was a stylus, often a slender reed, cut to a triangular tip. With patient precision, they pressed wedge-shaped marks into the clay. This system became known as cuneiform. Imagine yourself in the quiet of a scribe's workshop. Clay tablets are stacked nearby, soft and ready. The air is warm, carrying the faint smell of earth. You dip the end of a reed stylus into your hand, pressing carefully into the clay, one mark at a time. Each wedge is permanent once the clay hardens in the sun or kiln. What was once fleeting speech now rests solid and enduring. In Egypt, another tool emerged, the brush and reed pen. Here, papyrus replaced clay. Thin strips of reed were laid in crisscross layers, pressed and dried into sheets. A scribe cut a reed pen, dipped it into ink made from soot or ochre mixed with water and gum, and began to write. Imagine the gentle rustle of the brush against the papyrus, the faint scratch of the reed tip, the black and red letters of hieroglyphs flowing across the page. Each stroke carried not only information, but beauty, for Egyptian writing was both language and art. In China, the brush became the most honored of tools. Crafted with handles of bamboo and bristles of animal hair, it gave line a softness, a rhythm, a living quality. Ink was ground slowly on a stone, mixed with water, and applied with care. Calligraphy was not just writing. It was a form of meditation, an art of balance and flow. To hold the brush was to join mind, body, and spirit. Later, in Greece and Rome, styluses of metal or bone were used to write on wax tablet. Imagine a merchant carrying such a tablet, opening it to reveal smooth wax surfaces. With his stylus, he scratches figures into it, then smooths the surface again to reuse. Repetition, economy, practicality, and, still later, the quill appeared. A feather, often from a goose or swan, its tip sharpened and dipped in ink. In medieval monasteries, monks bent over parchment, their quills whispering as they copied sacred texts. The air is still, broken only by the scratch of quill on skin, the soft flicker of candlelight, the faint scent of ink and vellum. Their patient work preserved knowledge through centuries of turmoil. Each tool carried with it a way of thinking. The stylus pressed firmly, creating shapes that were angular, deliberate. The brush flowed softly, creating characters that seemed alive. The quill scratched and curved, producing letters that could stretch, ornament, or remain simple. Behind each invention were countless hands, reed cutters, ink makers, parchment stretchers, brush binders, quill sharpeners, anonymous artisans who ensured that thought could be given form, that memory could be made visible. The history of writing tools is not only about the words they carried, but the people who shaped them, and through them shaped civilization itself. From the beginning, writing was more than practical record-keeping. It was bound to ritual, to power, to the unseen mysteries of the world. Writing tools, humble though they seemed, became vessels of the sacred. Imagine a temple in Mesopotamia. The scribe kneels beside a clay tablet, stylus in hand. He records offerings to the gods, grain, oil, animals. To the worshippers, the act is not simply accounting. It is communication with the divine. Each wedge pressed into clay is a mark of order, of devotion, a way of giving permanence to what might otherwise fade with the day. In Egypt, the reed pen and brush became instruments of magic as well as record. Hieroglyphs carried power. To name something was to give it life. A scribe copying prayers onto papyrus, for the tomb was not just writing. He was ensuring that the spirit of the deceased could find its way in the afterlife. Imagine him dipping his reed into black ink, writing carefully by torchlight, whispering the words under his breath. To hold the reed was to touch eternity. In China, the brush became central to philosophy and ritual. Calligraphy was not merely a skill, but a discipline of the spirit. Each stroke carried balance, strength and softness, speed and stillness. A scholar grinding ink on a stone might pause to breathe, to center himself, before allowing the brush to move. The brush was considered one of the 4 treasures of the study, along with ink, paper, and ink. To practice writing was to practice harmony itself. Among Hebrew scribes, the quill was used with reverence. Copying the Torah, each letter was written with precision, never hurried, never careless. When the name of God appeared, the scribe would pause, sometimes using a special quill reserved only for that sacred word. The act of writing became a prayer in itself, the tool, a bridge between the human hand and the divine word. In medieval monasteries of Europe, the quill became an instrument of devotion. By candlelight, monks bent over parchment, illuminating letters with gold and vivid pigments. Imagine the silence of the scriptorium, broken only by the scratching of quills, the turning of pages, the soft crackle of fire. Each page was a gift to God, each tool an offering of labor and patience. Across cultures, writing tools were honored not merely as instruments, but as symbols. The stylus, the brush, the quill, all were treated with respect, often stored carefully, passed from teacher to student, even buried with their owners. To write was to capture breath, thought, and spirit. To hold a tool of writing was to hold a fragment of the eternal. For the powerful, writing was more than a means of record. It was a symbol of authority, refinement, and permanence. The tools themselves, simple reeds, feathers, or brushes in ordinary hands, became treasures when placed in the hands of kings, scholars, and nobles. Imagine a royal court in Mesopotamia. The clay tablet inscribed by a scribe carries decrees of the king. His words, once spoken, might fade, but pressed into clay with a stylus, they become law, enduring across generations. The tablet is sealed with the king's mark, not only a message, but a monument. The stylus, in this sense, is no less powerful than the soul. In Egypt, golden reed pens were sometimes buried with pharaohs alongside papyrus scrolls. To write was not only a skill, but a divine gift. The scribe was honored, for he could preserve the words of rulers and gods alike. In paintings and carvings, scribes are shown seated calmly, tools in hand, symbols of wisdom and authority. For the elite, writing was a legacy, a way to transcend mortality. In the courts of China, the scholar's brush became an emblem of refinement. To wield it gracefully was a mark of education and culture. The elite gathered in study rooms, their inkstones polished, their brushes bound with the finest hair. A single character, written well, carried the weight of virtue. To master the brush was to master oneself, and those who could write with elegance were revered as moral and intellectual leaders. In medieval Europe, quills became the instruments of kings, popes, and nobles. Decrees were signed with elaborate strokes, seals pressed into wax. The tools themselves might be decorated: silver inkwells, jeweled pen cases, parchment of the finest vellum, a king's signature, written with a quill sharpened by a servant, could raise an army, grant land, or alter the fate of nations. But for all their splendor, these tools also carried consequences. They separated the literate from the illiterate, the rulers from the ruled. To possess fine writing instruments was to possess access to knowledge, to power, to influence. The pen, in the hands of the elite, became not only a tool of communication, but a boundary between classes. And yet, over centuries, writing tools began to spread outward. What was once the privilege of scribes and rulers reached merchants, artisans, and eventually common households. The quill gave way to the steel nib, the fountain pen, the pencil. Tools became simpler, cheaper, more available. The ability to write became not only a luxury, but a right. Still, the memory lingers. The reed pen, the brush, the quill. Each was once a mark of the highest circles of society. Each shaped the way the powerful presented themselves to the world. Each left behind a legacy written not only in words, but in the tools themselves. As you rest now, perhaps with a pen or pencil resting quietly on a desk nearby, remember that it is part of this long story. From reeds pressed into clay, to feathers dipped in ink, to the instruments we hold today, writing tools have been more than objects. They have been companions, symbols, and keepers of memory. And with that, our journey ends. The story of glass and windows, of clocks and watches, of lamps and light, and of writing tools, for quiet paths through history, each showing how ordinary objects have shaped human life, how they have softened hardship, deepened meaning, and illuminated the night. Now the past is quiet. The tools are set aside. The world grows still, and you may let go, drifting gently into sleep. As we come to the end of this long and quiet journey, let us pause and look back together at the 4 paths we have walked tonight. We began with the story of glass and windows. You imagined life in darkness, where homes were closed off from the outside, where light barely entered, where the air was cold and damp. And then you followed the fragile birth of glass-making, molten sand shaped by ancient hands, windows slowly opening the world. We wandered through cathedrals where colored glass transformed light into sacred beauty, and into palaces where windows became the mark of wealth and privilege. From darkness to brilliance, glass gave humanity not only clarity, but a new way of seeing the world. Then we turn to the origin of clocks and watches. Before them, people lived by the rhythm of the sun, of shadows, of bells. Time was once a gentle, fluid companion. Then, through water clocks, sundials, and the gears of mechanical clocks, humanity began to measure hours with precision. In monasteries, bells rang to call monks to prayer. In cities, towers chimed to guide daily life. And in the hands of the wealthy, jeweled watches ticked as symbols of mastery over time itself. Clocks gave order, structure, and progress, but they also brought new pressures, binding life to the steady march of seconds. From there, we stepped into the history of lamps and light. We felt the darkness of homes without flame, the difficulty of working, gathering, or feeling safe when the sun had set. We watched as the first lamps were made from stone, shell, and clay, fueled by fat, oil, and wax. Their flames burned gently in temples, homes, and festivals, carrying meanings far greater than utility. Light was sacred, a symbol of spirit, hope, and eternity. And yet, as lamps became luxuries, they also deepened the divide between rich and poor, between palaces glittering with beeswax candles and cottages lit by a single smoky flame. The story of lamps was a story of comfort and wonder, but also of consequence. Finally, we arrived at the evolution of writing tools. Before them, knowledge was carried only in memory, fragile and fleeting. Then came the reed stylus pressed into clay, the Egyptian reed pen on papyrus, the Chinese brush on silk and paper, the Roman wax tablet, the medieval quill. Each tool shaped not only words, but the very form of thought, angular, flowing, curved, ornate. Writing became sacred in temples, holy in monasteries, refined in courts, and at last common in every home. From stylus to quill, from inkstone to fountain pen, writing tools gave humanity a way to speak across centuries, to share memory beyond the span of a lifetime. And now, all four stories join together. Glass gave us vision, clocks gave us rhythm, lamps gave us warmth, writing tools gave us memory. Each began as fragile, uncertain, shaped by humble hands. Each grew into something greater, reshaping how people lived, how they prayed, how they worked, how they dreamed. And each carried not only blessings, but burdens, divisions of wealth, the pressure of time, the hunger for fuel, the boundary between literate and illiterate. Yet in the quiet, what remains is their gift, a window that softens the darkness, a clock that steadies the day, a lamp that brings comfort to the night, a pen that carries thought across time.